Please rise for the Freedonian National Anthem.
Hello, I'm Cindy Yoakum, here at the 1891 Freedonia Opera House Performing Arts Center. I'm a librarian at the State University of New York at Freedonia and coordinator of the annual Freedonia Marxonia. It is my privilege to introduce the third in a trilogy of programs created by Noah Diamond. This year's If You Get Near a Song, Play It, the Marx Brothers in Music, follows Noah's amazing There's Nothing Like Liberty, the Marx Brothers and America in 2021, and Home Again, the Marx Brothers in New York City in 2020. With the support of the Carnahan-Jackson Humanities Fund and the Hahn Family Freedonia Marxonia Fund, both of the Freedonia College Foundation, I am again delighted to present from his home in Manhattan, author, performer, and Marx Brothers expert, Noah Diamond.
Thank you, Cindy, and a special hello I must be going to everyone who is watching live tonight at the 1891 Freedonia Opera House Performing Arts Center in Freedonia, New York. I imagine most of our audience is probably getting this tonight on a computer monitor, a phone or a tablet, maybe a television, but you, Freedonia friends, are seeing such a big my face, which is a little disturbing, especially for you. Well, friends, after Home Again, the Marx Brothers, and New York City, and There's Nothing Like Liberty, the Marx Brothers and America, there were many ideas in the air about a possible third chapter with an even longer title. What's the shape of the world, the Marx Brothers and Earth? But I figured Earth has enough problems. Maybe the third subject isn't a place, although like Earth, it's something we can't imagine life without. And it is as much a part of the Marx Brothers as New York City. And it's also a good excuse at the end of this 3-year pandemic-era Freedonia Marxonia cycle to have a good time and sing some songs. So this is the third show, but it's also kind of the party after the show. If we wind up in a cemetery at the end of this one, I will be surprised. I'm being told that there is an echo. Just a moment.
Here's it.
I don't know. It's all right. Well, if I could get an indication of whether I'm echoing now, then we can figure this out. I think the real stream is a few seconds behind me. So you'll be hearing this a little after I've said it. The question is, am I echoing? Am I echoing now? Am I echoing now is the question. I guess I'm stalling for time while the stream catches up with me. Apologies, folks. This is the thrill of live entertainment. Seems we may be okay. All right. Okay, well, let's try this again.
Introduce the third in a trilogy of programs created by Noah Diamond. This year's If You Get Near a Song, Play It, the Marx Brothers in Music, follows Noah's amazing There's Nothing Like Liberty, the Marx Brothers and America in 2021, and Home Again, the Marx Brothers in New York City in 2020. With the support of the Carnahan Jackson Humanities Fund and the Hahn Family Freedonia Marxonia Fund, both of the Freedonia College Foundation, I am again delighted to present from his home in Manhattan, author, performer, and Marx Brothers expert, Noah Diamond.
Thank you, Cindy. So now you'll get to hear me do the joke you just heard without the echo. I wanted to begin with a special hello to my friends in Freedonia, New York, who are watching this live on the big screen at the 1891 Freedonia Opera House Performing Arts Center. So hello, I must be going, but not for a couple of hours. After the last 2 years of these presentations, Home Again, the Marx Brothers in New York City in 2020, and There's Nothing Like Liberty, the Marx Brothers and America in 2021, there were many ideas in the air about what a third installment could be. What's the shape of the world, the Marx Brothers and Earth? But then it occurred to all of us that maybe the third subject for the third piece is not a place. But as with Earth, it's something that we can't imagine life without. And as with New York City, it's as much a part of who the Marx Brothers were as anything. And so it's also a good excuse at the end of this cycle, this pandemic-era Freedonia Marxonia trilogy, to just have a good time and sing some songs. It's the third show, but it's also kind of the party after the show. If we wind up in a cemetery at the end of this one, I will be surprised. Of course, like all great parties, this one will be followed by a Q&A session. So if you have questions, you can put them in the live chat on YouTube, or you can use the contact form at noahdiamond.com. And we'll talk after the show. The lovely and brilliant Amanda Sisk will be monitoring the YouTube chat and also the inbox, and will convey questions to me when the time comes. Along the way tonight, you will see musical performances that have been provided by Marx Brothers fans. Some are amateur or professional musicians or entertainers. Some are just fans with a song in their heart. You'll hear some familiar favorites, but we've also tried to favor unusual choices, including some that you may not have heard before. In order to keep the running time below 2 hours, many of the musical performances tonight have been abbreviated, but in the days ahead, I'll be posting a separate video with the complete performances of those songs. So no pressure, but if hitting a subscribe button is your idea of a good time, then you will know about that when it drops. And so, Signor Pastrami, what is the first number?
You're supposed to brighten up a place and laugh, clown, laugh. Paint a lot of smiles around your face and laugh, clown. Don't frown. Yes, in your vesty la yuma, you're calling out your laugh, clown, laugh.
I'd like to thank Mr. Diamond and Ms. Yoakum for having me here to speak to you lovely ladies and gentlemen of SUNY Freedonia. But first, I'd like to say a few words. Hello, I must be going. I cannot stay. I came to say I must be going. I'm glad I came, but just the same, I must be going. La la. For my sake, you must stay. If you should go, must be going. Before you go, you will write and tell us all your little lies. I'll do anything you say. In fact, I'll even say, but I must be going. Hurry for Captain Spaulding, the African explorer. He brought his name on time, he was not his coming day. Hurry, hurry, hurry. My friends, it brings me great pleasure to see Captain Spaulding, the African explorer. He brought his name on time, he was not his coming day. Hurry, hurry, hurry. My friends, it gives me great pleasure to speak of this. Friends, it brings me great pleasure. Hooray for Captain Spaulding, the African explorer. Well, somebody had to do it.
What shall I play, sir?
Play something you know real well. Your favorite.
Music and comedy are partners. They share many things: rhythm, timing, cadence. Comedy has percussion, it has melody, even harmony. Music has setups and payoffs. A running gag is a motif, a monologue is an aria. It's not surprising that almost all great comedians are also musicians. Many great musicians are also very funny, and there's a long tradition of great entertainers who could be classified as either. Music and comedy elevate reality. We react to them in ways that are involuntary, and they make human life on Earth a distinct possibility.
Did you like it, sir?
It's my favorite. Carl, you played it beautifully. My boy, you have the feeling and ability to become a great musician. And maybe someday old Adolf will make you famous. But it means work. Hard work.
A little over 100 years ago, amid the dying embers of European operetta, the black musical forms of blues, ragtime, and jazz ran into Jewish and Irish immigrant humor on Broadway and gave birth to a new, distinct art form known as musical comedy. Virtually everything the Marx Brothers did as a team was a demonstration of that art form. They were the most musical comedians and the funniest musicians, and their body of work contains a dazzling catalog of great songs. When we think of the brothers, the songs come to mind, equally with the jokes. Marx Brothers music spans genres and eras from the early 19th century to the late 20th. Some of it was written by the greatest composers who ever lived, some by relatively obscure workaday songwriters, and some by the brothers themselves. Marx Brothers music is more than just the songs performed as musical numbers in their work, because the brothers' musicality was constantly in evidence. Groucho's performances are strewn with song fragments, some of which he seems to be composing in midair.
Sing ho for the open highway, sing ho for the open road, with a ya-ha-ha and a ya-ha-ha.
The brothers also have a habit of producing or seizing musical instruments and playing them spontaneously for laughter, gaiety, ha-cha-cha. Or when When there are no musical instruments around, everyday objects become instruments in the Marx Brothers' hands. When Harpo and Chico played the Anvil Chorus on a cash register in the Coconuts, they created within the psyches of generations of fans an instinctive response to any slow, steady beat.
You know, music is my life, and when I'm driving in the car, it breaks my heart just a little bit that there's not more music. So I've worked up a little something called the Door Open Serenade. I can't play it with the door closed, but when the door's open, tune in again soon for Seatbelt Undone Serenade.
According to one of those unverified legends of show business, the cacophony created by dozens of upright pianos all at once, from the songwriters and song pluggers in music publishing offices on West 28th Street between 5th and 6th, sounded like a dissonant symphony performed on tin pans. So, informally at the beginning of the 20th century, and finally officially in 2022, the historical nerve center of the Great American Songbook is known as Tin Pan Alley. Most of the notable names responsible for Marx Brothers music were Tin Pan Alley songwriters. Bert Kalmar, Harry Ruby, Harold Arlen, Yip Harburg, Gus Kahn, and many others, including the arguable king of Tin Pan Alley, Irving Berlin. Berlin is on a very short list of people who can reasonably be called the greatest American songwriter of the 20th century. But he's famous among Marx Brothers fans for not having written a hit song for the Coconuts. Amusing anecdotes about that have fostered a misconception that the songs in the Coconuts are not good. In fact, Berlin wrote a delightful score for the Coconuts, and it's too bad so little of it survives in the movie. I mean, do we care if A Little Bungalow wasn't quite as popular as Alexander's Ragtime? You know what? I'm getting upset. Let's relax for a moment and listen to A Little Bungalow from the 1925 Broadway musical, The Coconuts.
I get busy attending to the happy ending. Let me tell you about my wonderful plan. A little bungalow, an hour or so from anywhere. A little cozy nest, the kind that's best for two. Among the shady trees with birds and bees and lots of air. And just enough of ground to fool around with you. Away from all the crowds, we'll watch the clouds go drifting by. And when the moon above presents a lovely view, there'll be a moon in blue, the one that you would occupy. It's understood that I would occupy it too. If you're anxious to...
Berlin's professional collaboration with the Marxes ended after Coconuts, but they remained friends and occasionally threatened to work together. And Berlin crept into the Groucho repertoire, including I Love a Piano, played on a guitar.
I love a piano. I love a piano. I love to hear somebody play upon a piano, a grand piano. It simply carries me away. I know a fine way to see a sine wave. Love to run my fingers over the keys, the ivories.
I Love a Piano was introduced in the Broadway review Stop, Look, Listen. It was 1915, so early in Irving Berlin's epic career that it was only his 18th Broadway show. It was a follow-up to his 1914 review Watch Your Step, and one of its stars was Joseph Santley, later to co-direct the film version of The Coconuts. Irving Berlin is now so strongly associated with his greatest hits that it's easy to forget how good he was at writing funny songs, despite his own assertion in You're Laughing at Me that humor is death to romance. He was as rhythmically clever as Gershwin, even though he didn't share Gershwin's musical literacy. Berlin couldn't read or write music and could barely play the piano, but he had a profound gift for making up songs. Hundreds and hundreds of songs. One of those songs was Stay Down Here Where You Belong, an anti-war number Berlin wrote in 1914 and later regretted. A combination of real affection for the song and the sentiment, and Berlin's profound discomfort with it, made this a Groucho standard. He was probably familiar with the 1915 recording by Henry Burr.
And your dad, they're breaking the heart of mother, making butchers out of brothers. You'll find more hell up there than there is down below.
One measure of Berlin's unmatched gift as a melodist is how well his songs hold up to stylistic interpretation. Even this one. The perception of Uncle Al Sheen as the Marx Brothers' celebrity comedian role model in the family is accurate. And the perception of Al Sheen's partnership with Ed Gallagher as the source of Sheen's greatest fame and success is also accurate. But the timeline is often collapsed in the telling, creating the impression that Gallagher and Sheen were a big deal during the Marx Brothers' childhood, or even that the young Marxes used to sing the famous Gallagher and Sheen song in emulation of their uncle. No, Uncle Al had been a star for many years, but the act with Ed Gallagher was not a going concern until 1920. All of the Marx Brothers were adults when they first heard that song. Nevertheless, it is a part of their legend too. In early editions of I'll Say She Is, Gallagher and Sheen were the stars impersonated in the theatrical agency sketch, which must have been especially pointed in Boston in September of 1923, when I'll Say She Is flopped badly against the competition, The Ziegfeld Follies, starring Gallagher and Sheen, maybe the last time Al would ever be bigger than his nephews. Decades later, Groucho and Jackie Gleason memorably performed the song as Mr. Gleason and Mr. Marx with new lyrics. It was one of Groucho's best television appearances, and it's especially touching to see him revisit Uncle Al's song on this occasion, one of his last appearances with a grease paint mustache. I believe it's the penultimate. The last is something we don't talk about. The song itself is an impressively durable comic duet and an excellent vehicle for lyric jokes of numerous kinds. It's immediately memorable and singable, and it can withstand any number of interpretations.
Oh, Mr. Conium. Oh, Mr. Conium.
Hello, what's on your mind today, Mr. Gasell?
In my latest council post, I believe I've diagnosed every reason why Go West can go to hell.
Oh, Mr. Gasell.
Yes?
Mr. Gasell.
What is it?
In the comments thread, there's quite the angry mob. This deserves a deeper dive.
One more podcast?
Maybe 5.
Absolutely, Mr. Matthew.
Positively, Mr. Bob.
Oh, Mr. Conium.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, Mr. Conium.
Yes?
I recall the Marx revivals of the past. Double features on the screen. Even some I haven't seen. Bet your early days were equally a blast.
Mr. Gasell.
Yes?
Mr. Gasell.
What?
Life on campus was indeed my cup of tea.
Yeah.
Just as any student would, I got as many as I could.
College credits, Mr. Matthew?
College widows, Mr. G.
Oh, Mr. Conium.
Yes?
Oh, Mr. Conium.
Why, yes.
Why, your singing voice is really quite a beaut.
Don't you think I sound my best when I've been on vocal rest?
No, I think you sound your best when you're on mute.
Mr. Gasell.
Yeah?
Mr. Gasell. When you sing, I think that ought to be your job.
Oh, thank you.
And with your looks the way they are, you could surely be a star.
At the opera, Mr. Matthew?
At the circus, Mr. Bob.
Oh, Mr. Conium.
Yes?
Oh, Mr. Conium.
That's me.
I believe your book could use just one more snoop.
Yes, I may just edit out old assumptions now in doubt.
Maybe scrap this whole damn chapter on duck soup.
Oh, Mr. Gasell.
Yes?
Mr. Gasell.
That's me.
On the brilliance of the Marxes, we agree.
But I'm the kind of fan who frowns on those other bunch of clowns.
Who, the Stooges, Mr. Gasell?
No, the council, Mr. C. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Harold Arlen, like Irving Berlin, the son of a cantor, was in love with jazz. But he had no desire to be a composer. He spent his early career performing as a piano player and as what he believed to be his true calling, a singer and actor. But an accumulation of evidence suggested that he was a musical genius in the wrong job. First, his band's greatest assets were the brilliant orchestrations Arlen had written. Then, after he finally landed a minor role in the Vincent Youmans musical Great Day, he wound up filling in for the rehearsal pianist one day and inadvertently dazzling the company with variations on Youmans' music. Those variations became Arlen's first hit, Get Happy, with a lyric by Ted Koehler. Arlen and Koehler spent the first half of the 30s writing 2 shows a year for the Cotton Club, where their work was interpreted as well as influenced by great artists including Duke Ellington, Ethel Waters, and Cab Calloway. Arlen's bluesy style blossomed during this period, whose eternal classics include Between the Devil and the Deep Blue Sea, I Love a Parade, and Stormy Weather. At the same time, Arlen began composing for Broadway, including his first collaborations with Yip Harburg. Harburg was an Orthodox boy from the Lower East Side who spent his early years gravitating away from his religious upbringing and toward what he called his substitute temple, the theater. But before he was the social conscience of Broadway, he spent the First World War in Uruguay as a journalist and factory worker, and the 1920s owning and operating an electrical appliance company. Throughout these years, he nurtured the songwriting habit he'd developed in school. The Depression sank the electrical company, but Harburg arrived on Broadway in 1932 with the song that would define the era, Brother, Can You Spare a Dime?, with music by Jay Gorney. As his work evolved, two distinct specialties came into focus. One was whimsical humor and wordplay, with an emphasis on portmanteaus and newly coined words and phrases. The other was social significance. Together, Harold Arlen and Yip Harburg wrote the songs for 3 Broadway musicals and several films, including 2 1939 MGM musicals. One was The Wizard of Oz. The other was At the Circus. It's possible that their work on Wizard of Oz was better. But of course, there is still one great classic song from At the Circus, which we all love.
Gosh, the circus is in trouble.
And Margaret Dumont won't give you any money.
What are we gonna do? Let's sing. Two blind lovers, two blind lovers. Do we know what we're doing? Two blind lovers. Don't know what month it is or the time of day. Don't know if we're in Brooklyn or in Mandalay. I only know the sun started to shine the day that I looked into your eyes and you looked into mine. Two blind lovers, babes in the wood. We've got it oh so bad, but isn't it good? We're on a bumpy road, it's true, but heaven isn't you for two blind lovers. Two blind lovers, two blind lovers. Do we know what we're doing? Two blind lovers. Don't know from appetite, don't know fish from steak, don't know if it's a donut or a wedding cake. I only know the sun started to shine the day that I looked into your eyes and you looked into mine. Two blind lovers, babes in the wood. We've got it oh so bad, but isn't it good? We're on a bumpy road, it's true, but heaven isn't you for two
Why, hello, everybody. My name is Andy Marx, and for those of you who don't know, I am the grandson of the one and only Groucho Marx. And I'm very happy to be here for this musical tribute in honor of my grandfather's birthday, which is October 2nd. And before I get to my part of the musical evening, I thought I would share with everybody what it was like to actually spend a birthday with my grandfather. It was pretty much the same every year for as long as I can remember. Growing up, we would go to a place in Beverly Hills called Trader Vic's, which was a Polynesian restaurant in the Hilton Hotel. Every year, for some reason, my grandfather would say, "Let's go there for dinner." We'd go for dinner. He'd eat his meal. He would grumble about it. Then the maitre d' would come over, and he would say to my grandfather, "How was everything, Mr. Marx?" And my grandfather would say, "This is some of the worst food I've ever had. Take it back to the kitchen and dump it on the chef's head." And he says, "I'm never coming back here again." And then, of course, the next year, we would be there. So I don't know if it was a love-hate thing or what, but that was the pretty much the evening. And then after dinner, we would all go back to my grandfather's house up in Beverly Hills, and we would all sit around and play music. I'd take out my trusty ukulele or play piano, and we would play some of my grandfather's favorite songs, and some of his favorite songs were actually written by my other grandfather, Gus Kahn, who was one of the great songwriters of the 20th century. He wrote some great songs. If you don't know the name, you'll know the songs. How about "It Had to Be You," "Dream a Little Dream of Me," and the one I'm going to do right now, "Making Whoopee." But Groucho, he loved Gus Kahn, and he loved Gus's songs. And of course, Gus wrote some songs for Marx Brothers films, including "All God's Children Got Rhythm" for "A Day at the Races." So anyway, they were very close, and Gus died in 1941, but up until then, they were very close, and Groucho had a tremendous amount of respect. He loved songwriters, and he thought Gus Kahn was great. And he loved the song "Making Whoopee," and "Making Whoopee" was from the 1928 show that my grandfather Gus wrote the songs for with Walter Donaldson, and that show was called Whoopee. Starred Eddie Cantor, and my grandfather Groucho once told me that he loved the show so much that when it opened, he went for a week straight. He went to every performance for a week straight, and his favorite song was, of course, "Making Whoopee." So anyway, I'm going to play that for you tonight. I know it's not from a Marx Brothers movie, but I thought I would honor my grandfather, and he loved this song. So again, it's my grandfather Groucho's favorite song, and it was written by my other grandfather, Gus Kahn. So there you get a 2-for-1. All right, here we go. "Making Whoopee," 1928, Gus Kahn, Walter Donaldson. Another bright, another June, another sunny, sunny honeymoon, another season, another reason to make whoopee. A lot of shoes, a lot of rice. The groom is nervous that he answers twice. It's really killing. The cat's so willing to make whoopee. Picture a little love nest down where the roses cling. Picture that same sweet love nest. Think what a year will bring. He's washing dishes and baby clothes. He's so ambitious, man, he even sews. So don't forget, folks, that's what you get, folks. So don't forget, folks, that's what you get, folks. So don't forget, folks, that's what you get, folks, for making whoopee. For making whoopee. Making Whoopee, 1928, written by my grandfather Gus Kahn and Walter Donaldson, and one of my grandfather Groucho's all-time favorite songs. Happy birthday, Grandpa Groucho.
In
party of their vaudeville days, the Marx Brothers were associated with a wide range of music. Some of the songs they performed in the period from the Leroy Trio to I'll Say She Is were comic novelties or romantic pop, not hard to imagine in Marxian terms. And then there are things like this 1906 hit by Gus Edwards. Gus Edwards was a prolific songwriter, performer, and impresario of vaudeville. He was responsible for the wildly popular School Days, the act the Marx Brothers were consciously imitating in their first comedy tab. And he was an early discoverer of Julius Marx, who was one of Gus Edwards' postal telegraph boys in 1906, singing this song. And then there's the first piece of exclusive original material ever purchased for the Marx Brothers, a song written by a vaudevillian named Charles Van, who sold it to Minnie for $27 in 1912. If you're wondering, that would be about $800 today. And if you know the song, well, imagine how often you'd have to sing it over a period of 50 or 60 years to feel like you'd gotten your $800 worth. This looks like a job for a real vaudeville performer.
How do? Trav S.D. here, direct from Great Neck, New York, where about a century ago, Groucho Marx used to hang his hat just a few blocks that away. Chico Marx used to live here around the same time. They all used to attend great jazz age parties. About 10 minutes up the road is Bayside, New York, where the entire Marx family used to live when they started to make it big on Broadway. And a little further down the road, you'll find Astoria, Queens, where they made their first movies at the Paramount Studios there. So, we're in a wonderful place to honor, well, okay, I'll be honest. I was asked by Noah Diamond to perform a song, and while I'm not able to do a song, I will be performing something similar. Now, this is one of the very first numbers that Groucho ever sang publicly, and he did it throughout his life, often joined by his brothers when they wanted to clear out the house of the guests, when they wanted to wrap a party up often, and you'll see why. Now, if you've got a dog or some other family pet, you may want to send them out of the room. Way down by the sad seaside, sat two lovers side by side. First he sighed and then she sighed, and then they both sighed side by side. Peasy Weezy, what's his name? Peasy Weezy, Peasy Weezy, what's his game? He will catch you if he can. Peasy Weezy, Peasy is a bold bad man. Went to my
he should have known to stick to the sick and leave the well alone. Peasy Weezy, what's his name? Peasy Weezy, Peasy Weezy, what's his game? He will catch you if he can. Peasy Weezy, Peasy is a bad man. Boom, 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 boom. Ma told sister, come downstairs. She was in the bathtub doing her hair. Slip on your slip and toddle on down. She slipped on the life boy and broke her crown. Peasy Weezy, what's his name? Peasy Weezy, Peasy Weezy, what's his game? She will catch you if he can. Peasy Weezy, Peasy is a bad man. Sha-la-la-la-la, sha-na-na, rama-lama, shama-lama, sha-na-na-na. I went to Altoona, but the tuna melt. So I went fishing and I caught a smelt. Of all the smelts I ever smelt, I never smelt a smelt like that smelt. Peasy Weezy, what's his name? Peasy Weezy, Peasy Weezy, what's his game? He will catch you if he can. Peasy Weezy, Peasy is a bad man. Scoo-doo, Scooby-doo-doo, shooby-dooby-gooby-dooby, ring-a-ding-ding. I know a hunchback from Notre Dame took him to see the varsity game. The fullback fell and the tackle he tacked. The hunchback asked for his quarterback. Peasy Weezy, what's his name? Peasy Weezy, Peasy Weezy, what's his game? He will catch you if he can. Peasy Weezy, Peasy is a bad man. La la, wah wah wah, la 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 la, gig gig. Bought me a cow from Farmer Brown, showed him around a little one-horse town. The rooster crowed and the crow called loud. The cuckoo cooed and the cow cowed. Peasy Weezy, what's his name? Peasy Weezy, Peasy Weezy, what's his game? He will catch you if he can. Peasy Weezy, Peasy is a bad man. Hunga dunga, chug chug chug. I could sing this song all week, but my predicament's a little unique. The judge told me if I sang it again, he'd throw me back in the federal pen. Peasy Weezy, what's his name? Peasy Weezy, Peasy Weezy, what's his game? He will catch you if he can. Peasy Weezy, Peasy is a bold bad man.
Every Marx Brothers fan knows this tune, but not every fan knows what it is. It's often and easily confused with the similar-sounding Sugar Time, which was written by Charlie Phillips and Otis Eccles and recorded by the McGuire sisters, Johnny Cash, and many others. But that's not it. Sugar Time was decades later. Our song, which is part of Chico's piano specialty in Animal Crackers and Harpo's harp specialty in Monkey Business, and is woven through the soundtracks of Monkey Business and Horse Feathers, was dubbed the Chico Motif by the great Marxian webmaster Frank Bland. Officially, it has 2 titles, because Chico copyrighted the song as I'm Daffy Over You, and then, with slight revisions and a different lyric, as Lucky Little Penny.
Say, if you get near a song, play it.
With the possible exception of Hooray for Captain Spaulding, no piece of music is more associated with our brothers. Brothers films have been old movies for so long now. To have been 10 years old when The Coconuts was released is to be 103 today. But of course, to their immediate contemporary audience, the Marx Brothers were new. They were current. They were cool, or as that audience might have said, smart. They were popular stars of their time, and the popular music of their time was an important part of their language. When the Marx Brothers were conquering Broadway, 2 University of Pennsylvania law students formed a band and wrote a song. Their names were Mo Jaffe and Nat Bonks. The song, Collegiate, became one of the biggest hits of the 20s and was put to good use as Harpo's entrance music in Animal Crackers and Chico's piano solo in Horse Feathers.
The Professor. Second fiddle. hearts in the middle. We're collegiate gentlemen, we.
Play the song about Montreal. Montreal, I'm a dreamer, Montreal.
Montreal, in search of happiness. Montreal, sometimes a little sad. Love comes to call, we start to fall. Montreal, human, no one is to blame. But deep inside us, Montreal the same. I'm a dreamer, Montreal. Just a dreamer, Montreal. Each night it seems I've gone to Montreal. It's so charming, Montreal. It's alarming, Montreal. It's ideal, but then it isn't real, and I'm a fool. But Montreal, so amusing, Montreal. It's confusing, Montreal. Out of luck, sometimes I feel I'm stuck against the wall. But Montreal,
I'll play this thing again. No, don't play it. Sing it.
Hooray for Captain Spaulding, the African explorer.
Did someone call me Schnorrer?
Hooray, hooray, hooray!
was a vaudevillian magician and dancer who turned to songwriting when hindered by a knee injury. Harry Ruby was a frustrated baseball player who turned to songwriting because it was a relatively secure profession. They formed a partnership around 1920 and spent the jazz age writing songs, sketches, scores, and librettos for vaudeville and Broadway in a career that now seems like a tour of future Marx Brothers collaborators.
Exactly 4 miles from what is now the Harlem section of New York, the place of your birth on January 27, 1895. Barnett and Toby Rubenstein have 6 children, and you are the 3rd. Life on the streets of New York isn't the easiest thing for a young boy growing up, and it's a thin line that separates you from leading the simple life that you were to write about in later years, or becoming a juvenile delinquent. In fact, you came very close to the latter, didn't you, Harry, one time? I did, Ralph, I did, yeah. From the time that most people can remember, though, you always seemed to be at a piano, Harry.
Well, it's better to be at a piano than be in a department store shoplifting.
That's right.
The songs of Bert Kalmar and Harry Ruby are sometimes typical Tin Pan Alley products, or parodies of typical Tin Pan Alley products. They were capable of deeply ironic work and elegant wordplay. And although Bert was primarily a lyricist and Harry was primarily a composer, they both did both and were billed together for words and music. Years before Kalmar and Ruby worked on Animal Crackers in 1928, Groucho noticed that this songwriting team was both exceptional and right up his alley. In the Marx Brothers scrapbook, Ruby remembers that he and Kalmar were working in the offices of Watterson, Berlin, and Snyder. This was among the nation's largest music publishers for over a decade, and 2 of its partners were Ted Snyder, with whom Kalmar and Ruby had collaborated on the Tin Pan Alley chestnut Who's Sorry Now, and Irving Berlin. One day, Julius Marx, the vaudeville star, paid a visit, specifically to meet Kalmar and Ruby and express his admiration for their work. An easy friendship began, soon accompanied by a long and fruitful collaboration. Kalmar and Ruby wrote the songs for Animal Crackers, Horse Feathers, and Duck Soup, and co-wrote the screenplays for the latter 2, along with piles of material for other Marx Brothers projects and specialty material for Groucho. It's the greatest teaming of comedians and songwriters in the history of show business. Animal Crackers, like the Coconuts, lost a lot of good songs on its way to the screen. But Animal Crackers on Film also gained a great song, which was not in the Broadway version, but is now close to the heart of every fan.
The music of the great Kalmar and Ruby.
And arranged by the great Terence Alaric.
Tell me, dear, why am I so romantic?
When you're near, why am I so romantic?
What a grand feeling when your lips meet mine. A certain something comes stealing up and down my spine.
I don't know what it is you do to me.
You don't know half of the good you do me.
Other
Girls bore me, they just leave me blue. But why am I so romantic with you?
Tell me, sweet.
Oh, tell me, sweet.
Why am I
so romantic? We're calling Lillian, but not waxing wroth when we meet.
Each time we meet.
Why am I so romantic?
You're like a flame to my left-handed moth. Now my heart's soaring with your every glance. A great thrill and exploring. We're shooting our love pets
In pajamas when we pet.
Bert and Harry had an even greater Marxian love song up their sleeve, as demonstrated by the fact that each of the four Marx Brothers performs it in horse feathers. It's become a standard, performed since 1932 by many artists, including our friends at the Engle Lane Community Theater in Streator, Illinois. It's a great song, and its use in horse feathers is the greatest expansion of an old favorite. The solid pop song delivered straightforwardly by Zeppo, then interpreted or parodied by each of the other brothers. And because Horse Feathers is in some sense a musical, we can also say it's a highly unusual, if not unique, use of the reprise.
Starts feeling frisky and begins to roar. There's another lion who knows just what he's roaring for. Everything that ever grew, the geese and the gander and the gosling too. The duck upon the water when he feels that way too says, that's a wise quack.
They tried to get one more love song into Duck Soup, but the romantic subplot between Zeppo and Raquel Torres was cut. And with it, their duet.
I want you to meet His Excellency's secretary, Bob Rowland. Ambassador Trentino.
How do you do, sir? How do you do?
Miss Markel.
We've met.
Just keep on doing what you're doing, although it's leading me to ruin. Just keep on doing what you're doing, 'cause I love what you're doing to me. Just keep on doing what you're doing, although I know there's trouble brewing. Just keep on doing what you're doing, 'cause I love what you're doing to me. Your lips as red as wine, our lips I can't resist. And when they're pressed to mine, I wanna be kissed and kissed. Just keep on doing what you're doing, although it's leading me to ruin. Just keep on doing what you're doing, 'cause I love what you're doing to me. A skibbity bop bop dee ba da ba da ba da ba dee da doo da ba 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 da ba dee da 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 ba ba da ba da, 'cause I love what you're doing to me.
We've met.
A skibbity bop bop dee ba da ba doo ba da ba da ba ba dee bop zeedly da doo ba. Just keep on doing what you're doing, 'cause I love what you're doing to me. Your lips as red as wine, our lips I can't.
Perhaps sometime we get a chance to dance together, huh?
I wanna be kissed and kissed. Just keep on doing what you're doing, although it's leading me to ruin. Just keep on doing what you're doing, 'cause I love what you're doing to me.
Today, Father, is Father's Day, and we're giving you a time. It's not much we know, it's just our way of showing you. We think you're a regular guy. You say that it was nice of us to bother, but it really was a pleasure to us. For according to our mother, you're our father. And that's good enough for us.
Show me a rose, show you a girl who cares. Show me a rose, now leave me alone.
believe that you don't know me until you show me I'm wrong.
A wandering minstrel I, a thing of shreds and patches of...
Ed Metcalf was an important member of the Marx Brothers supporting company from Home Again through I'll Say She Is. And we know him from the film version of Animal Crackers as Conductor Hennessy. Inspector yourself. He was also credited with, or occasionally blamed for, introducing Groucho Marx to the works of Gilbert and Sullivan. And so began a lasting obsession, cresting with his performance as Coco the Executioner in the 1960 NBC TV production of The Mikado. Not that he needed a formal invitation.
Are you old enough to marry, do you think? Won't you wait till you are 80 in the shade? There's a fascination frantic in a ruin that's romantic. Do you think you are sufficiently decayed?
The matter that you mentioned, I've given some attention, and I think I am sufficiently decayed.
Decades later, what did the hip young audience at the Dick Cavett Show think when the anti-establishment icon launched into a selection from a British operetta that was written before Groucho was born? And not only that, he berated that audience for not being able to define the word obdurate. Needless to say, they loved it.
On a tree by a river, a little tomtit sang willow, tit, willow, tit, willow. And I said to him, Dickie bird, why do you sit singing willow, tit, willow, tit, willow? Is it weakness of intellect, birdie, I cried, or a rather tough worm in your little inside? With a shake of his poor little head he replied, ah, willow, tit, willow, tit, willow. He slapped at his chest as he sat on that bough, singing willow, tit, willow, tit, willow.
Beyond Groucho's passion for the Savoy operas, there's the influence of Gilbert and Sullivan on the Marx Brothers' work. It's naturally most obvious in the songs. Kalmar and Ruby gave Groucho plenty of fast comic patter surrounded by admiring choruses. But as Scott K. Ratner has pointed out, Gilbertian satire is not limited to the songs, especially in Animal Crackers, Horse Feathers, and Duck Soup. And it's not all Kalmar and Ruby. Despite his famous aversion to music, George S. Kaufman knew his way around Gilbert and Sullivan, too.
Now I feel just as sure as I'm sure that my name isn't Willow, tit, willow, tit, willow. That was blighted affection that made him exclaim, ah, willow, tit, willow, tit, willow. And if you remain callous and obdurate, I shall perish as he did, and you will know why, though I probably shall not exclaim as I die. Ah, willow, tit, willow, tit, willow.
Hey, everybody. I'm Marty Millett.
I'm Michael Guerin.
And we want to remind you that political change begins at the local level. Now, we're not politicians, but if we were, this would be our platform. As someday it may happen that a victim must be found.
We've got a little list.
We've got a little list
of society offenders who might well be underground and who never would be missed.
they never would be missed.
There's the pestilential nuisances who snore on airline flights.
All people who ride bicycles and run the traffic lights.
All guys on motor scooters on the sidewalks, not the street.
All persons who wear flip-flops and who never wash their feet.
And out-of-towners who on walking 5 abreast insist.
They'd none of them be missed.
They'd none of them be missed.
We've got them on the list. We've got them on the list. And they'll none of them be missed. They'll none of them be missed.
There's the billionaire car maker and the others of his ilk.
And the men's rights activist.
We've got him on the list.
And the people who serve coffee but have only almond milk.
They never would be missed.
They never would be missed.
Then the crypto bro who praises with enthusiastic tone imaginary currency no one can really own.
And the lady from Piscataway online at TJ Maxx who's done a lot of research and is proudly anti-vax.
And that singular anomaly, the flat earth scientist.
I'm sure she'll not be missed.
I'm sure she'll not be missed.
We've got her on the list. We've got her on the list. And I don't think she'll be missed. We're sure she'll not be missed.
And that enervating nuisance who just now is rather rife.
Who?
The podcast humorist.
Oh, yeah. We've got him on the list. All edgelord comics, right-wing trolls, and clowns of online life.
They'd none of them be missed.
They never would be missed. And this is the only part of the song we didn't change, folks. And apologetic statesmen of a compromising kind, such as, what do you call them?
Thingamabob.
And likewise, never mind.
And
what's her name?
And also you know who.
The task of filling in the blanks we'd rather leave to you.
But it really doesn't matter whom you put upon the list, for they'd none of them be missed.
They'd none of them be missed. You may put them on the list. You may put them on the list. But they'll none of them be missed. They'll none of them be missed.
That was written by Marty Millen.
There's an old Italian phrase. It's an old Italian craze. Every little bambina learns it the very first day. Every sweet senorina says it the very same way. These funny little words don't really mean a thing. It's just a phrase that nowadays Italians love to sing. Così, cosa, it's a wonderful world, la 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 la. When anyone asks you what you are, it's proper to say così, cosa, così, cosa. If a lady should ask you if you care, you don't have to start a love affair. Say così, cosa. Does it mean yes? No. Does it mean no? Well, yes and no. Così, cosa. Come together and sing la 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 la. It's easiest way to try and say. Learn to say today così, cosa, così, cosa, così, cosa.
It may seem ironic that the Marx Brothers would be associated with opera, which is why Irving Thalberg thought it was such a funny idea to put them there. Yet there are references to and selections from operas all through their work, and even an extended and bizarre Carmen parody in The Coconuts. Opera was popular entertainment in the 20s and 30s, and the Marxes, in their first MGM film, aren't really attacking opera. They're fans as long as the good guys and not the bad guys are in charge. As Matthew Coniam writes, the Marxes destroy the opera in order to save it, because Gottlieb and Las Parry are not worthy of it.
She was a gal with that fire in her eye, and I passed out when she passed by. I couldn't resist her, I didn't even try, 'cause you can't argue with love. She was the kind that can love and forget. I knew that love would just lead to regret, but I was the victim the minute we met, 'cause you can't argue with love. I knew she wasn't good for me. I knew it right from the start, but her ways were mighty pleasing. And how you gonna reason with your heart? Sometimes I think I hear her knocking at my door, and I wanna tell her, you don't live here no more. But I take her back just like I did before, 'cause you can't argue with love.
A big part of my personal experience with Marx Brothers music concerns a group of songs still unknown to most fans. I'm talking about the score of I'll Say She Is, as it was heard in the 20s and in my adaptation for the show's first revival. The songs in I'll Say She Is had lyrics by the show's book writer, Will B. Johnstone. Will was a prolific and multi-talented artist, now best known for his work on the screenplays of Monkey Business and Horse Feathers. In his long career as a political cartoonist, he created one of the classic images of the 20th century, the taxpayer wearing a barrel. Will had an older brother, Alexander, and a younger brother, Tom, both composers. Over 15 years, the Johnstone brothers, in various combinations, wrote 12 Broadway shows. During the long process of researching I'll Say She Is, I was able to find several of the original songs, some with the help of the collector Ira Dolnick. But we only had what had been published. There remained a handful of lost songs. To fill in the blanks, I found other songs by the Johnstones from the same period and wrote new lyrics to approximate the missing songs from I'll Say She Is. I was presumptuous enough to do a polish on the other songs too. In his article about the revival, Adam Gopnik observed that the lyrics had been quietly improved. The new score of I'll Say She Is was a collaboration with the Johnstone brothers. I got to know them through their writing, their music, and their descendant, Meg Farrell.
It finally gelled that someone could write a show that facilitates the Marx Brothers comic antics, their bits, almost like any other librettist would facilitate a song.
When you're working on a musical, you live with the songs every day for a long time. And working on I'll Say She Is, we often reflected on the idea that many of these songs the Marx Brothers had lived with too.
no videos on Facebook.
The 2016 production involved a long list of musical challenges, all taken in stride by the remarkable company and director Amanda Sisk and musical director Sabrina Chapp. We were guided by the understanding that if we want our audience to feel like they're seeing the Marx Brothers, we have to at least approximate their musicality.
Cut it out. Hey, kitty. Sorry, ladies. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4.
Musical challenges in recreating the Marx Brothers, there is one that few dare to hope for. We didn't contemplate it for the Fringe Festival in 2014, but I had 2 good reasons to dare to hope that when I'll Say She Is opened off Broadway, Harpo would play the harp. The first reason was Les Marsden, and the second was Seth Sheldon. When we were kids, our grandmother, Red Lerner, would take us to the Goodspeed Opera House. Renowned for both the development of new musicals and the restoration of old ones, Goodspeed was an eye-opener for me, never more so than in 1992, when I was 15 years old, and Goodspeed's fall musical was Animal Crackers. I had made my public Groucho debut the previous year.
Hello, I must be going.
Allow me to welcome you.
Say, you're the most beautiful woman I've ever seen, and that's not saying much for you.
But that had been an imitation of a movie. That evening at the Goodspeed Opera House, I finally understood that the Marx Brothers were musical theater. 2 things I loved were the same thing. The brothers of Animal Crackers in 1992 were Frank Ferrante, Les Marsden, Robert Michael Baker, and Craig Rubano. The director was Charles Repoli, who had played the Eddie Cantor role in the revival of Whoopi at Goodspeed and on Broadway. At intermission, my sister went to the ladies' room, then returned with the news that she had just met Chico Marx's daughter. And on the way out of the theater after the show, we saw Maxine in the crowd and smiled and waved. I did not realize then that the 2 young men with Maxine were Paul Wesolowski and Robert Bader. But I did realize that the Marx Brothers were suddenly a lot more real than they had been the day before. In my book, Gimme a Thrill, I wrote about the experience of watching Ferrante's Groucho tearing his way through a beautiful production of Animal Crackers. Because I was a teenage Groucho, of course I was especially attuned to Frank's performance. But Les affected me no less. And even more than Groucho or Chico, Harpo is a musical theater role that should be impossible to play. If it looks like a Groucho and talks like a Groucho, it's a Groucho. But to be Harpo, you have to be Harpo. It's on another level because Harpo was on another level. And so was Les Marsden. And halfway through the show, he delivered one of the most magical theatrical moments I've ever witnessed. As a pair of dancers parted to reveal the professor glissandoing away, the audience spent a moment wondering how this miraculous effect was achieved. Perhaps there's another harp in the pit, and he's miming this? And then a gradual wave of amazement as we all slowly accepted what was happening before our eyes. So this is what it was like to sit in the theater when that happened. I mean, we've seen the films, we know Harpo plays the harp, but what a thrill to be surprised by it again. To go along for the ride, to accept these guys as the Marx Brothers, and to be rewarded for it with the feeling that we made Harpo play the harp, by believing in him. 22 years later, Trav SD and I were casting the staged readings that would be the first public hearing of my adaptation of I'll Say She Is, and this guy showed up.
I've had music in my life since I was born because my whole family, most of my family are musicians. That's how my parents met, was as musicians. Like my dad was the youngest band leader in the Catskills resorts back in the days when that was like Vegas. He and my uncle, his identical twin brother, had a band, like the Sheldon Twins Orchestra. They were like, as children, they were like on the Ted Mack Amateur Hour, like basically like the original Star Search, I guess, or something. My dad then went on to like go to Juilliard. He worked with Leonard Bernstein and had this classical career, was a recording artist and played on Broadway and played with Rosemary Clooney and played at the White House. He played at Billy Joel's wedding. Like, he did everything. And he never forced it on me. Well, okay, that's not true, I guess, in the early days. Like a lot of kids, I had to take piano lessons.
Amanda, who was helping us run the audition, saw him first.
I was, citing people in, taking the headshots in, all that. And we were auditioning directly down the hall from Legally Blonde. And so as someone would come down the hall, I could pretty much tell who was coming my way and who should be going the other way. So I would just yell, Legally Blonde, or I'll Say She Is. And sometimes I'd get it wrong, but most of the time I got it right. And then this man walked into the hallway, and I looked at him and I said, well, that's Harpo.
And then when you left, it was like you left us different than you found us, And I remember Trav and I both looking at each other with this expression on our faces.
In the readings at Marx Fest and then in the Fringe Festival, Seth's ability to summon the essence of Harpo Marx had all of the characters' musical compulsion. Well, almost all.
We didn't have a harp, and I couldn't play the harp, and that was... I just said, okay, well, how about if I play other instruments instead of the harp? And everyone was like, that's fine.
But through a miracle arranged by Kathy Beale, we put a harp in his apartment and let them get to know each other. And then I did something terribly unfair. I can't believe I did it. I can't believe Seth forgave me for doing it. It was February 29th, 2016. We were doing a fundraising event at the Lambs for a room full of theater people and journalists and legends.
I've seizing power from the Swiss. My hand is freezing, I'll have to stand like this. Hail the holy castle be moved when you conquer the world.
My only excuse is that I was selling the show so hard in those days. We were in a desperate fundraising moment.
It is truly a show that has everything. Except $50,000.
And before I had a chance to think about it, I was saying this.
Our own Seth Sheldon has raised the stakes by, in his remarkable way, learning to play the harp. And so, we now need... You didn't know I was going to tell the world about that, did you?
One of my parents' friends was a harpist, and her name was Betty, and we would go visit her house, and she had a harp. And there's like a picture of me sitting there that I was just looking at recently as a child with her harp. But it was like not unlike Harpo's grandmother's harp, just like sort of sitting there all the time in Betty's house. And just this image, this icon, more than a thing that I ever thought I would touch or be able to play. Every time I sat at the harp, it was like I was going to be somebody else for a minute. It was just this other aspect of this character, which was rather incongruous. It doesn't make that much sense, and that makes all the sense in the world.
One of these days, we'll tell the whole story of how the sense of wonder I felt at the Goodspeed Opera House in 1992 was felt at the Connolly Theater in the summer of 2016. But it takes an extraordinary person to play this extraordinary person. And if you want to play the man, you have to play the music.
Singing act she called the Three Nightingales. It was Groucho, Gummo, and a kid named Lou Benson. I didn't want anything to do with it. I didn't want to jump around in front of a bunch of people. I'd rather do almost anything else. And besides, I couldn't sing. If I joined the Three Nightingales, they'd have to call themselves the Four Nightmares. They were already bad enough as it was.
My attraction to the brothers began in high school, but when I was in college, I was in the theater, and there was something intriguing to me at the age of 20 or 21 about doing a one-man show. I'm always intrigued by a challenge. And so I thought, well, you know, Harpo, I'm in love with Harpo. And what was he really like? Of course, by that time, I had read everything I could. I had a compulsion about Harpo.
Les Marsden is the only artist known for recreating the performances of all three major Marx Brothers. Not just comedically, but musically. Harpo's is a famous curiosity among Marx fans, but Les also created the dual Harpo and Chico role in Groucho, A Life in Review, and played Groucho in later productions, as well as in Minnie's Boys in Los Angeles and at Universal Studios, and played Harpo in several productions of Animal Crackers in the 1990s. There's a long list of non-Marx Brothers acting and directing credits, too. For the past 20 years, he's been the founding musical director and conductor of the Mariposa Yosemite Symphony Orchestra.
My parents took me to a piano teacher, and she said, oh, I never take students that young. But then after I played for her, she said, oh, yes, I will take him. And I began the piano lessons at 4 and credentialed to teach at 11 and picked up brass instruments, everything else along the way. It was something that I've had a deep passion for my entire life.
And so when the Marx Brothers entered your world, you must have related to and identified with the sort of compulsive musicality that's always on display in their performances?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Harpo with that harp, I thought, wow, as I think we all do. And as Susan said, when he sat down at the harp, that's the real Harpo. That's when you saw who he really was.
Susan, of course, is the remarkable Susan Fleming. We've all gotten to know Susan much better with the recent publication of her great memoir. But less got to know her in real life.
Once, when Minnie was out on the road getting bookings for us, I got this huge crate from her, and a note along with it that said, "This will add some class to the act." I had no idea what the hell she was getting me in for now, but I opened it up. It was this gorgeous gold thing. I fell in love with it.
Found Susan's address and phone number, called her up out of the blue and said, "Hi, I'm 20 years old, blah, blah, calling to my university, and I'll be graduating in a year, and I'd love to do a one-man show on the life of your husband, if you wouldn't mind." And she said, "Well, I would mind, and we've never allowed anything like that before, and we won't now. Goodbye." Hung up. And I thought, well, okay. And I wrote her a letter then, a long letter, and I said, "Please don't tell me that I can't do the show until we've had a chance to meet." And so I sent that letter off to her in Rancho Mirage, and a couple of months went by, and I had given up on it. And so I also fully appreciated Buster Keaton. And I got Eleanor's phone number, and I called her up, and I said, blah, blah, blah. And she said, "Oh, that sounds wonderful. I'd love to talk to you about it." And then figure the next day, here comes this letter from Susan saying, "Well, you still can't do the show, but at least you can come meet me." She opened the door, and she said, "Oh, well, you must be Les. I'm so glad you're here. Would you like some lemonade? I'm going to go next door to the neighbors. They've got limes. It's so much better with limes. So just look around. Have fun. I'll be back in a few minutes." And so I did exactly that. It was just astonishing. And of course, this was not the house. This was not El Rancho Harpo. She had sold that and built this house on her own. But it was just so incredible to be in that house and see the works of art, to see Harpo's paintings, to see so many things that I had only seen in books. And a few minutes later, she came back, and essentially, next thing out of her mouth was, "Well, I feel like I can trust you. You can do whatever you want with the show." We sat down and began to talk that first day. And that's where a lot of the recordings come from, that very first day.
He was a perfectionist, very serious about his craft. And I remember once asking him if you could, or somebody said, "Are you nervous opening night or when you're going on?" He said, "I couldn't get my fingers between the strings if I was nervous. I figure I can play better than anybody out in that audience. And that's the way it's going to be. So they're going to think I'm great no matter what I do."
Whenever she spoke of him, she glowed. And there was a combination of sadness and joy.
But he could always do anything.
That's the thing. I'm so overwhelmed because, I have studied the harp, and it is an extraordinarily difficult instrument.
Oh.
I am overwhelmed at the fact that he was able to teach himself. I've read accounts by people who saw him play, professional harpists who saw him play, and just couldn't believe the way that he played and the effects and the sound that he could get out of the instrument playing it incorrectly. And who's to say which is the correct way now?
That's right. And I used to marvel at the ability of a person to be able to sit on a stool, have your feet going and your hands going at the same time. I don't know how they do that. I don't understand, never did understand the harp. It's a little like the telephone. And Harpo had different fingers, you see. He had wonderful big paddy fingertips. And a professional harpist, an accomplished harpist, apparently, if you practice correctly, you practice all the tip off the end of your finger, and it's hard callous, which is why they have a hard sound, and Harpo had such a soft sound to his music. And that was really, that plus the fact that he wore this ragged costume and played the harp. The whole thing made it just wonderful. But he played well. Harpo loved chords. He would sit by the hour just playing chords. Hey, Mom, listen to this. That's nice, dear. It's the same goddamn chords it seems to me I've been hearing for years. But Harpo always felt that he had put in something new, and I said, oh, that's really lovely. I remember one time he said to me, I want you to hear, he says, I've been studying with somebody or other, I've got a new arrangement for it, and see if you like it now. He says, we're all finished, it's kind of surprised. Okay, and he's playing, and I'm listening, and I can't believe my ears. And finally he's finished, and I said, you kidding? He says, why? What do you mean? What am I kidding? I said, that's Indian Love Call, right? Yeah. I said, you just finished playing it in this movie. Didn't you know it? Well, he never listened to the tune. He only listened to the chords. And somebody gave him a whole new arrangement of chords. He didn't pay attention to the tune that was going along with him.
Yeah.
Along with those wonderful new chords. That was the new sound to him. He loved chords.
To what extent are Harpo and his brothers with you all the time now? How much do you think about them?
They're still there, and it's not as though I fantasize about them or that I think about them every single day, but it's like they were people that I grew up with. The years have given me a chance to become more reflective about who they were. What I now know and feel about all five of them, I think back to when I was first doing my show 40 years ago, and I think, I knew nothing. I knew absolutely nothing. If only now. And the funny thing is, now I'm the age he was in 1953. I'm old enough to be 4 years older than he was in Love Happy. And I feel that in some ways, there's so much more that I relate to him about, that I can understand about him, and that applies to all four of them. But Harpo, again, he was probably the most magical, the most down to earth, but at the same time, the most off this planet. And I would have loved to have known him.
Love was a tingle with merriment. What Jerry meant, she'll never know. So was I under the eastern sky. She was applying her powder puff, a louder puff I've never heard. Up on her head her hat was, oh what a summer that was. Show me a rose, I'll show you a girl who cares. Show me a rose, or leave me alone. Show me a rose, I'll show you a stag at bay. Show me a rose, or leave me alone. She taught me how to do the tango down where the palm trees swayed. I called her Rosa Mia, and she called a spade a spade. Show me a rose, I'll show you a storm at sea. Show me a rose, or leave me alone. One night in Bixby, Mississippi, we watched the clouds roll by. I said, my dear, how are you? And she whispered, so am I. Show me a rose, and I'll show you a girl named Sam. Show me a rose, or leave me alone. Show me a rose, a fragrant rose. Make believe that you don't know me until you show me a rose.
Tell me, dear, why am I so romantic? When you're near, why am I so romantic? What a grand feeling when your lips meet mine. A certain something comes stealing up and down my spine. When we pet closer, your arms will hold me. Ya-da-da, I forget all that my mother told me. Other girls bore me, they just leave me blue. But why am I so romantic with you?
Well, here we are, ladies and gentlemen and friends. I hope that I'm not echoing right now, but I assume someone will let me know if I am. As noted earlier, the stream is a little behind me, so perhaps it'll take a moment for everyone to start rolling into the Q&A. But while we wait for that, and after just saying thank you from the bottom of my heart to everyone who has spent this evening with us. I just want to offer a few small corrections that I noticed while the proceedings were unfolding tonight. First, I noticed that in Carl Fortunato's Chiron, he played that wonderful Chico-inspired piano solo. His name is Carl Fortunato, and I know him. I've always known him as Carl. Was introduced to him as Carl, but on Facebook he's Carlo, and I just wasn't sure if it was a preference or a new idea. He set me straight on that, but I never fixed the Chiron. I'm sorry about that, Carl. Your name is Carl. I also, from the special thanks, egregiously omitted or forgot to include Brett Leverage. Brett's specific contribution to the proceedings tonight was that incredible player piano track of the Gallagher and Sheen song. But Brett is a dear friend, a great Marxist, and probably would be appropriate to include him in the thanks of anything that I've done in recent years. That might be my corrections. Oh, no, I have one more correction. This was a late addition to the presentation, and I guess I just didn't get to it, but when Seth is giving his first interview, the first clip of Seth's interview, you can hear an instrumental solo under him, and I never noted either on the screen or in the closing credits what that piece of music was, and I wish I had, because that was Seth playing When My Dreams Come True from the Coconuts a la Harpo on his father's clarinet. So that's a really special as well as beautiful recording that Seth produced just for this, and happy to mention it now, even though I neglected to put it in text on the screen. Also, this is not really a correction, but I am a little disappointed in myself that I didn't find more reasons during the presentation to say Nat Bonks. Listeners to the Marx Brothers Council podcast know that of all the songwriters in history, there is none whose name I have more fun saying than Nat Bonks. And our friend Hannah Mira, who you may also know from the podcast, she wins the award for the best Instagram comment of the day, which was on my post about this presentation. She said, "You had me at bonks." So, bonks for the memory, friends. I have, just so everyone knows too, I can't see the live chat from where I sit here, so Amanda is conveying these questions to me in a document. Here's a good question. Jules Gray, hi Jules, my Twitter friend, asks, will we ever get to hear what Four of the Three Musketeers goes like in full? Yeah, it's a good question. Actually, you can hear it. It has been recorded. Frank Ferrante has a CD that he recorded. I think it's called Groucho Sings or Groucho Sings Kelmar and Ruby. And the song is there, so you can hear it. Another way to hear it is to get your hands on the sheet music and play it or have someone play it for you. Or, better yet, see a live production of Animal Crackers, or pressure your local theater to do a live production of Animal Crackers. In fact, pressure them to hire me to come out and play Groucho, and we'll all sing it together. Eleanor Kennedy, hi Eleanor, asks, where was that Alone filmed? I wish I knew. I don't. That would be a good question for John Harkins. I don't know if he's live with us tonight, but maybe we can find out. It does seem to be a house of worship, based on both the organ and I think the scene behind him, but I don't know for sure. Beautiful though. Scott Sandage, hey professor, it rhymes with bandage. Scott Sandage, another huge figure in my recent Marx Brothers life. He asks, I think this must be a question for Andy. Well, if Andy is still with us in the chat, maybe you can answer this and we'll make it happen. What's that? Yeah, the question is whether Andy or anyone in the family still has Groucho's golf cap with the ice cream cone shaped things on it, familiar from the Cavett Show and other appearances. It's a good question if that hat exists. Oh, and Scott Ratner himself asks how much of the I'll Say She Is revival is preserved on video. Well, the whole show is on video. In fact, I think 3 performances in their entirety are on video, and that's what I always draw from when I do something like this, where there's some I'll Say She Is referencing going on. There's also on YouTube a 17-minute highlights reel from the show that is drawn from those videos. I guess the implied question is, will the entire show be made available on video? And I know it's a little disappointing, but I think the answer is no, and that's not really what we want. What we really want is a great video of I'll Say She Is that tells us what that show was like and makes us feel like we were there. And, you know, as anyone who's done theater will tell you, Scott Ratner, as much as anybody can tell you, you know, the video recording of a play, unless it's very carefully, professionally shot, it just has so much of the energy drained out of it. I do feel pretty committed in the long term to getting a version of I'll Say She Is on film and publicly available. I do think it's important to do that. But because of all the work that's gone into the show and because of what that show means and meant long before I ever got to it, I just really want to make sure that an I'll Say She Is that's made available on film is the best possible I'll Say She Is it could be. And I also want to just emphasize that my reservations about the entirety of the video from the Connolly production has nothing to do with the production. It's everything in the production I would still gladly sign my name to, and I'm so proud of everyone involved. It's video itself and its inability to really convey what's happening in theater. All right, I probably answered that enough. What gave you the inspiration for this particular presentation this year? Hi, Barb, one of those 5 kids up in Canada. Oh, speaking of Canada, folks, I'm a Dreamer Montreal is a song now. That alone would have been enough for me with this presentation. The inspiration, actually, same answer. The inspiration for this presentation, one answer is Amanda did. When Cindy Yoakum first started to talk to me about the possibility of a 3rd Freedonia presentation, or really a 4th if you count the one I did in person in 2017. As I said at the top of the show tonight, we were trying to figure out, well, there's not really another place to tie this to. And what could we do that would fit in with the previous 2 presentations, but also, you know, be its own thing? And Amanda said, well, why don't you do music? You know, just make it about their music and have a bunch of people perform the songs. And it just immediately seemed like the right idea. And it was. Another answer to the question, what inspired me to create this one is Cindy Yoakum and Freedonia Marxonia. You know, I've come to love the Freedonia Marxonia program and the world of SUNY Freedonia, where it intersects with the Marx Brothers so much. And then in 2020, when the pandemic happened and life changed so much, having Home Again, the first of these virtual presentations to work on, was really important for me that year. It really gave me a sense of purpose, and at that time when nobody really knew what was going on, what life was going to be like, throwing myself into that project was just what I needed. And as with a lot of streaming events during the early days of the pandemic, I think it meant a lot to other people for that reason too. It just made us all feel connected at a time when we were all, you know, quarantined and shut off from each other. And then the next year, when Cindy asked if I would like to do another one, I was perfectly happy to, and I knew kind of what the second one could be and had some ideas for it. And this time around, you know, Cindy asked, you know, all she had to do was ask. I'm so grateful to her. I'm so happy to have, this has really been, I mean, all 3 of these, it's really been great for me. Yes, did you have something to, were you about to say something? Oh, okay. All right.
No.
Okay. So here are some Andy questions. Okay, Andy. Mary Lou Who 2. If you liked Mary Lou Who 1, you're going to love Mary Lou Who 2. It has everything the original had. What is the best or most memorable piece of advice you got from your Grandpa Groucho? And if Andy is answering these questions, I guess everyone except me can see them in the chat. Oh, I'm being told to scroll up in our document. Oh, let me take a look. I don't know how to do that. All right. Another question for Andy, and if these pop up in the chat, we will. You'll see them, and I'll try to take a look at them too. Tom Hamill, hi Tom, asks if Andy has a favorite Gus Kahn song. A lot to pick from. Oh yes, I'll See You in My Dreams, by Gus Kahn, and certainly one of the greatest songs ever written. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, I think George Harrison once said that I'll See You in My Dreams is his favorite song, and he performed it sometimes too. And in Home Again, the first of these 3 presentations, Andy did a beautiful rendition of I'll See You in My Dreams, accompanying a montage of some of the surviving theaters that the Marx Brothers appeared in New York. What was Groucho's second favorite song? I don't think I knew that Groucho had a special affection for Makin' Whoopee and for the show Whoopee. That might be something I've come across at some point, but I don't think I knew that until Andy mentioned it. Another thing I didn't know, I wonder if some of the other Marx maniacs in the chat, if this was new for you also, but I don't think I had previously heard about Harpo's fingers. Harpo's, as she says, wonderful paddy big fingertips, and that had something to do with the softness of his sound. It seems like such an important and basic thing, but I don't think I knew it, and I don't think it's in Susan's book. But I've only read it once so far, so I could be wrong about that. All right, let's see. Oh, well, that's a question it's very much on my mind about the audience experience tonight, is I really want to know who sang along with Trav. I would like to know who sang along with Trav, and also who sang in unison with Trav, and who sang Groucho's harmonies from the Dinah Shore show. The Peasy Weezy, what's his name? Peasy Weezy, what's his game? Maybe we should just sing Peasy Weezy a few more times. Yes. Oh, and I was reminded of that because of a comment here from Barb, remembering seeing Groucho on the Dinah Shore show doing Peasy Weezy. Yeah, that's a wonderful performance and a great rendition of the song. Okay, Seth says, is this a question for Seth or from Seth? It's from Seth for me. What's my favorite Marxian song? That is certainly a question. I guess Show Me a Rose might be my answer to that. I sometimes feel bad when my favorite Marx Brothers things only involve Groucho. It seems a little unfair, but like my favorite scene in a Marx Brothers movie probably is the strange interlude scene in Animal Crackers. But it only has one Marx Brother in it. Anyway, Show Me a Rose, that's a mysterious and enigmatic and beautiful song. It's one of the few times when Groucho, I think, achieves something similar to what Harpo achieves in his harp solos. Show Me a Rose is kind of reflective. It has this bittersweet September song quality to it. I like it a lot, and I particularly am interested in the intro, the original intro, which I sang in the finale tonight. And that intro is in the Kalmar and Ruby songbook, the version of Show Me a Rose that's in that book. I'd never heard it before. I assume we are all familiar with the intro that Groucho usually sang. Ever since songwriters started writing songs. But I really kind of like the original one, and it's just interesting to hear something different at the top of that number. If you could be in the audience for any live performance of the Marx Brothers' career, from vaudeville to the road shows, which would it be? Well, it might be too easy to say I'll Say She Is, but that's the one, you know. That would have been my answer at any point. But particularly now, having done I'll Say She Is on stage, it would be really interesting to get an authoritative answer to the question of how close we got to the real thing. So that's my answer. Several people sang along, but not as many as you would like. And in addition to that question, I would love to know if the audience at the Opera House sang along, if the Opera House was ringing with the sound of singing during Peasy Weezy. I think Minnie would be delighted to know that a century later, Peasy Weezy, people are still sort of patiently getting through Peasy Weezy. When I asked Trav if he would do a number in this piece, he said, and he pointed out that he thought probably nobody had ever said this before in history. He said, "Dibs on Peasy Weezy." And there's a comment, I wonder what attracted Minnie to this song. It had lots of verses. Yeah, it has as many verses as a Dylan song, somebody says. Yeah, too bad Dylan didn't ever cover Peasy Weezy. He would have been actually just the right person to wring the proper pathos from it. Kathy says Frank is smiling. Yeah, Frank Bland, who's responsible for the website Why a Duck, which was, I'm not sure if it was the very first, but it was certainly part of the early internet explosion of Marx Brothers activity and websites. And Stefan Timfus, who runs the MarxBrothers.org, marx-brothers.org, he has preserved Frank's site. Frank Bland isn't with us anymore, sadly. But Stefan has really done a great thing, many great things with his site. One of them is preserving the Why a Duck site, so you can still see Frank's really considerable contribution to this thing that we all care about so much. One of Andy's favorite memories of Groucho, playing piano for him while he sang. Yeah, well, that's a pretty good answer, and not many people in the world who have had that beautiful privilege. I know I, and probably lots of Marx Brothers fans, first sort of learned about Andy and encountered information about Andy in some of the Groucho books and in discussions of Groucho's later years. Andy Marx, grandson Andy Marx, coming over to the house and accompanying his grandfather on the piano. It's just an image I think we've all had in our heads ever since we started reading those books anyhow. Danny Fingeroth, hi Danny, says, is there a story behind finding the footage with Al Sheen playing the violin? Yeah, or playing the violin teacher. There is a story, but this is a story about dumb luck. I was just building that opening sequence and trying to figure out where I could find, some overview material. I wanted something that wasn't from a Marx Brothers movie or necessarily directly connected to them, but that would somehow resonate with the idea of the Marx Brothers and the ideas that were going to be explored in the ensuing presentation. And I was just looking at old public domain films that had references to music in their titles on Internet Archive. And I stumbled upon this. Symphony of Living is the name of that film. I didn't know about it before. I thought, okay, well, let's see what this is. And in the cast list, Al Sheen. I thought, well, it would be great if we could make that happen, if that worked out. And sure enough, it was just perfect. It was like, and it just seemed as though it had been timed to the narration I'd already written for that segment. Just dumb luck, but yeah, that was really nice and great to get a look at Uncle Al. And I love what he says at the end of that scene, where he's sort of counseling this child about what it takes to be a musician. And what he's saying is it takes work, hard work. But Al Sheen says, it takes work, hard work. And he just sounds like a Marx brother a little bit. That voice sounds a little bit like maybe the way I hear Harpo's voice in my head. Just wonderful. Yeah, Uncle Al. Ryan Rowe. Hello, Ryan. Ryan says, what's your favorite cover of a song originally performed by the Marx Brothers? Well, that's a tough question to answer because tonight we've just heard 2 hours of fantastic covers, of many of which were songs performed by the Marx Brothers. And not to slight any other participants in the presentation tonight, all of whom were wonderful, but the first thing that popped into my head when I saw the question was Josh Max playing I'm Daffy Over You on the guitar, recreating Harpo's harp solo of that song on the guitar. Just beautifully done, and I've watched that several times, and it moves me every time. And Josh Max is really extraordinary, and once in a while someone earns the right to walk away from the camera in slow motion after playing music, and he did. That guy did it. Do you ever walk around the old tenement building the Marx family lived in to try to find inspiration? Well, I have certainly visited 93rd Street a lot and stood outside that building. I've been in that building. I am friendly with Susan Catherine Hefty, who ran the 93rd Street Beautification Association, and so she has shown me around the hallways and things like that. In Home Again, we visited 93rd Street, and we ran into another resident of that building who told a great Groucho story on camera. You can see that in Home Again. And I also, for a while, was part of the effort to try to landmark or otherwise mark that building. Those efforts kind of fizzled. There are many complicated reasons why we weren't able to make that happen in 2014. It's not to say it couldn't happen at some point, but at one point we had entertained the possibility of putting aside the question of official landmark status with the city, which is very complicated, and maybe just try to have a sign put on the building. That way people would know that the Marx Brothers lived there, fans would appreciate it, and maybe it would raise awareness and support for a more formal landmark effort. Well, it's another long story that I probably shouldn't go into all the details here and now, why we weren't able to make that happen at MarxFest in 2014. That was a planned MarxFest event. However, thanks to Kevin Fitzpatrick, I don't know if he's with us tonight, but Kevin is another great guy who belongs in this crowd. We actually do have the sign. It's right here. So someday when we manage to get this little chore done, the sign's ready to go, and it's nice looking and weatherproof, and it's not really doing anyone any good sitting here at my desk. What size uke is Amanda playing? I believe that's a concert ukulele. Is that right? It's a concert uke. And I also have a note here from Amanda. Please tell them I play rock and roll uke a lot better. This old shit doesn't come as easily to me. That's why I robbed the cradle. Wow, there's a lot to unpack here. Don't tell them that last part. You should always put the don't tell them this before the thing that you want me to not tell them. Amanda robbed the cradle because I suppose I am 11 months younger than her. So one month a year, we get to be equals. Andy said Groucho loved pecan turtles, and so do I. Oh, that sounds familiar. I think that's a tidbit I might have known. But it wasn't fresh on my mind. Now I want pecan turtles. Oh, Andy Marx says he will play Ukulele Lady next year. Yeah, I've heard you play that, Andy. I think maybe you released a video on social media at some point in the last year or so. I've definitely heard Andy do Ukulele Lady. I really love the way Andy plays and sings, by the way. I mean, we all love Andy, and of course, even if we didn't, the fact that he's Groucho's grandson would be plenty of reason to spend time with the guy. But boy, Andy Marx is a terrific guy and really good on the ukulele. I love his phrasing. I love the way he plays and sings, and he has threatened to release an album of Gus Kahn songs. And do it, Andy. I'll bet you could sell some copies of that among this crowd. Okay, here's a question for Andy from Scott Sandage. What do you think of the casting of the movie? That, I assume he's talking about the forthcoming film version of Raised Eyebrows, the wonderful memoir by Steve Stoliar about his years working for Groucho. There is a major motion picture in the works, and it was announced earlier this year that Jeffrey Rush has been cast as Groucho, which is interesting, I think. It's not someone I ever would have thought of, but I could see it. I'm really intrigued and looking forward to seeing that. And maybe Andy will express some opinions about that in the chat. Do they really live in that house from 1895 to 1908? Let me check. Yep. Yes, those are, I believe those are the years. At least I hope so, because I hope we did our research before making the sign. I thought they moved around a lot. Yeah, you're right. They did live at 93rd Street during that range, but it is true that was quite exceptional, living in one building for 14 years. Until then, they moved around constantly, and almost no two Marx brothers were born in the same home because the family moved so much every time the rent was due, as one anecdote has it. But they actually did live at 179 East 93rd Street for 14 years. There's some question as to whether they might have switched apartments within the building at some point in that range, but we're not sure. There's conflicting evidence. It's a subject for more investigation one of these days. Dan McKenzie says, I'm a trophy husband. Well, I don't know. I mean, Amanda may have 11 months on me, but I also think no one would deny she's easier on the eyes than I am, too. Are there plans for a Marx uke orchestra? Asks Scott Ratner. There are now. It is organized and administered by Scott K. Ratner, and I encourage everybody to attend the upcoming debut of the Marx Brothers Ukulele Orchestra. Let's call it Scott K. Ratner's Marx Brothers Ukulele Orchestra. Question for Les. And boy, I in the presentation said so much of what I feel for and about Les Marsden. But I will just add to that now of the many beautiful pleasures and privileges that this Marx Brothers experience has brought to me over the years. Getting to know Les Marsden has absolutely been one of the tops. I love that guy. If Les is still here, the question is, what's your favorite Marx Brothers movie? There you go, Les. There's an easy one for you. Maybe that's not an easy one, but I'll bet there's an answer on deck. Danny Fingeroth asks, can you post the lyrics for I'm a Dreamer Montreal? Yeah, I don't see why not. Do you have any objection to that, Amanda, if I shared the lyrics for Montreal? I will do it. I'll share the lyrics in the Marx Brothers Council group on Facebook and other places too, if anyone wants them. Thanks for that question. That's nice. The idea of making this song out of just a little throwaway joke from Animal Crackers, like what if I'm a Dreamer Montreal was a song? That was the original idea. And first I thought, well, maybe it'll just be a list of Canadian cities or something. I couldn't really make that work. And so the lyric wound up in its final form. But I have to say, besides the idea of spinning a song out of that joke, I think Amanda's rendition of it brought so many more layers to it. She really made I'm a Dreamer Montreal into a profound psychodrama. I'm not sure who the woman is that Amanda is playing in that scene, and I'm not completely sure what the word Montreal means to that woman, but I really want to know more. Maybe that song is just part of a forthcoming musical about Montreal, or not about Montreal. Most musicals, if you think about it, are or are not about Montreal. Question for Seth, if he is in the chat right now. Are you still playing the harp? Perhaps an answer to that will roll in soon. Obviously, Seth is another person who I won't go into detail about how much I love him because it's all in the presentation. But boy, if that guy hadn't come along, what would all this look like now?
Seth says for rehearsing, that's $15 an hour.
Seth says for rehearsing, that's $15 an hour. I think that might be a Marx Brothers reference. I'm a little... Oh, and I have a note here. Ukulele Lady by Andy is downloadable. That's good to know. So go out and find that. There also is, in addition to Andy's great rendition of I'll See You in My Dreams that was part of Home Again in 2020, he also did a beautiful recording of that same song for Michael Feinstein's American Songbook series, and you can find that on YouTube also. That's a pleasure too. In fact, I think that's what I saw that made me ask Andy if he would do something like that for Home Again. And actually, since we're on that subject, never mind. I had something I was going to add, but it slipped my mind. It'll come back. What music composer deep dive did you have to cut? Well, I don't think there were any complete songs or investigations of composers that were cut, but a great deal of material was cut in order to tame the running time. Maybe surprisingly, this one wound up with much more excess than the previous two. There really weren't that many deleted scenes from the previous two. But this one, I guess maybe because of the musical content, there really was a lot, and early assemblies of it were running, ridiculously long. So I did take significant stuff out of the Irving Berlin section and the Arlen and Harburg section. Those come to mind instantly, but not musical stuff, just documentary stuff with me talking about them. And I maybe along with the complete performances of some of the edited songs, maybe I'll release those full segments on YouTube also, and you can see. There was more about the original production of the Coconuts, for example. I also went into more detail about the careers of both Arlen and Harburg. In the beginning, before I started to receive the musical submissions from people, I sort of felt like, I'm doing a presentation about songwriters, about all these great Tin Pan Alley songwriters who worked with the Marx Brothers. And I generated a lot of that material. Then when the songs started coming in, I realized we got to make room for all these songs. And so I cut down some of the narrative sections more. Oh, that's the thing I wanted to mention. There is one song that was submitted to me, but that is not in the presentation. But it wasn't for time. Grace Wagner, I don't know if Grace is live with us tonight. Grace Wagner really did a remarkable thing for a song for this presentation. She recruited musicians playing various instruments. She had them all play their part in the same arrangement, playing along with a click track, so that all these videos could be synced up and they would play together like a band. And it was really wonderful. The problem turned out to be that the song that Grace selected turned out not to have the Marx Brothers connection that we thought it had. And so, since it wasn't connected to the Marx Brothers, it just seemed like we couldn't spend minutes on it in the presentation. That's another thing, if it's okay with Grace, that maybe I'll make available, because it's quite remarkable, and I did feel bad. Grace really went to a lot of effort to make that happen, and it's remarkable. Okay, Bob Gassel asks, how many Frenchmen can't be wrong? The answer is February, which has 28, and every weekday, one day more. Every leap year, one day more.
You don't know anything.
What's that?
You don't know anything.
I don't know anything. I don't know anything. If anyone has any books or anything about the Marx Brothers, maybe I can educate myself. Dan McKenzie, the Engel Lane Theater piece with Everyone Says I Love You. I should apologize, I think, to Dan and his company. That was one of the most severely edited pieces in the presentation. Dan produced a really interesting, maybe 4 or 5 minute slideshow with all these images from the Marx Brothers productions that they've done there at the Engel Lane Theater, with a little bit of new video and this recording of their company members doing Everyone Says I Love You. It was really wonderful, but I just couldn't make that fit into the Kelmar and Ruby section cleanly. So I took their wonderful recording and some of their visuals and made it work that way. But in this forthcoming unedited songs video that I'll have up by the end of the weekend on YouTube, you'll get to see the complete version of that as well. Dan's question is, any upcoming things for me, books, etc.? Well, there are some things. I'm not sure there's much that I'm ready to talk about, not because I'm keeping the lid on any great secrets, but just because they're still in this kind of, half-baked form. So I don't quite have the descriptions yet, but there are there are 3 projects that are very much on my mind as things that I hope I do soon or next. Of those 3, 2 of them involve the Marx Brothers and 1 of them doesn't. And then there's, another 5 or 10 things that I know of that I'd like to get to. The one thing I'll just say a word about, the thing that isn't about the Marx Brothers, although it does mention they do pop up in it a little bit. But before I got really busy with If You Get Near a Song, Play It, I was doing a lot of writing on the subject of Jewish identity, secular Jewish identity. And I wasn't quite sure, I'm still not quite sure if that material is a book, or maybe it's a solo theater show, or maybe it's a podcast, or maybe it's all those things. But it was promising. I really liked the way it was going, and I think it was a little different from me. For me, it might be something that, there's a lot of things that matter to me that are unexplored in other things I've done. So anyway, that's something that I hope I get to soon. And if I do, I'll let you know if it's a book or a show or what it is. But it's about secular Jewish identity. I know it sounds like a million laughs, but it actually is funny. Barb asks, when you were a tour guide, did you work in trivia about the Marx Brothers? Yes, I did. For anyone who may not know, for many years, my day job was as a New York City tour guide, mostly on double-decker buses, in the real golden days of the double-decker industry in New York in the late 90s into the early 2000s. And my solo show and book, 400 Years in Manhattan, are all about that, my experience as a tour guide and also about the history of the city. So there's one. If anyone doesn't know 400 Years in Manhattan, why not pick up a copy of the book? And another one for everyone you know. But the question was, yes, I did talk about the Marx Brothers on my tour sometimes. Sometimes I would find ways to mention them in the theater district for obvious reasons. There's also a quote, I fear this might be one of those misattributed Groucho quotes that he didn't really say. And in those days, this is a long time ago, I guess like over 20 years ago now, my early tour guide experiences. In Greenwich Village, I used to talk about the literary history of the village a lot and all the great writers who lived there. And I would use a quote that I've seen attributed to Groucho, which was, everyone in New York City has half a mind to write a book, and does. It just sounds like something he could have said, but older and wiser now, and having been around the block with sort of fake Groucho quotes, that one raises red flags for me. Maybe someone in the chat knows and can say, oh yeah, he said that, or no, he didn't. But that was another time. Sometimes they would come up on my tour, and I would introduce that. It was really an excuse to mention Groucho, and I would say something like, my personal hero Groucho Marx once said. But he probably didn't say that. Danny Fingeroth asks, why not the Marx Brothers in Jewish identity? Yeah, why not indeed? I think that's actually a rich topic, and I think there is a lot to say about it. There is a little segment of Home Again that deals with the Marx Brothers as Jews, but it's only really fleetingly addressed. Yeah, I would gladly work on something on that subject. I think the Jewish identity piece that I was working on, or am working on, is there's too much else going on in it to make it about the Marx Brothers. A lot of it's about Fiddler on the Roof, believe it or not. But that too mentions the Marx Brothers, and the Marx Brothers are part of my sort of process as a younger person of finding my identity as a Jewish person without a terribly strong connection to the Jewish religion. Jewish comedians kind of became my religion. Anyway, there's a lot to be said about all of those subjects, and we'll have to say it. Was the Monkey Doodle Doo written for the Coconuts? Brett saw sheet music that said it was introduced in Lou Field's production of All Aboard. Yeah, this is the classic case of the double Monkey Doodle Doos. Irving Berlin actually wrote 2 songs with that title, something like 10 years apart. They're not really similar in any way. Different melody, different lyrics. It's not the same song. And the first one is the one you're talking about that was in that Lou Field's production. And the second one was in the Coconuts. I don't know how to explain that, except that if you are as prolific a songwriter as Irving Berlin, maybe it's inevitable that you'll probably write 2 songs called the Monkey Doodle Doo, Maybe he wrote two songs for every title that he came up with. And if you put 12 monkeys in a room with a typewriter, they'll eventually write the Monkey Doodle Doo too. Barb thinks we should order dinner from Cats. Cats' Deli, I assume, not cats. The animals, they can't make dinner. Yeah, I'm always ready to go to a deli. A director's cut of those segments that got trimmed would be deeply appreciated. Yeah, I'll do that. Probably not a director's cut of the whole thing, but I'll release another video that'll have some of the songs, probably not the ones that did play in their entirety in the presentation, but the ones that were edited down. And sure, I'll also add the longer cuts of the Irving Berlin sequence and other things. Fiddler is about Quebec, said Ratner. I'm not sure I'm following that comment. If Scott Ratner said it, I'm sure it means something, and I'm sure it's either very funny or very wise and true and interesting. When are you going to cut the watermelon open? By the way, I have my official Sisk mug from her presidential campaign, which is ongoing. There's one more comment here that I jotted down in my notes. Actually, a few. One thing is, in the Gilbert and Sullivan sequence, I hope somebody appreciated that recording of A Wandering Minstrel Eye from the Mikado that begins that segment is sung by Kenny Baker. So we did find a way to get Kenny Baker in, which reminds me of Nick Santamaria. Would anybody not rather hear Nick and Noel sing Two Blind Loves than Kenny Baker and Florence Rice? It's just wonderful, and all of Nick's contributions. I love listening to Nick play the uke and sing songs too. Wonderful. And another thing that I meant to mention, I couldn't find a graceful way of getting this into the presentation without kind of stopping the momentum for it. But it's just a really interesting fact that Les told me. That performance of A Night at Harpo's that you got to see those clips from, and oh boy, just to see clips from that. I've been curious about that show, for like 30 years or something. At that performance, 2 of Harpo's children, Bill Marx and Minnie Marx, were both in attendance at that show. So when you hear the applause and laughter in those clips from Les, some of that applause and laughter is from Bill and Minnie. Scott Ratner explains, you said all great musicals are about Montreal, of course, but Fiddler is about Quebec. I knew it meant something. Will there be a fourth presentation is the question. Well, there won't be, I won't be doing another one of these next year for Freedonia Marxonia, if that's the question. This has been really a great run, and I've really, as much as any of the other things I've done, these Freedonia Marxonia presentations, they feel more like films at this point, but you know, they all originated as like the virtual streaming equivalent of a lecture with a slideshow. So that's how I think of them. I think it's time for somebody else to have a chance to be the guest speaker for Freedonia Marxonia. But on the other hand, I'm sure there will be other things like this. You know, I'm sure I haven't said my last about the Marx Brothers, and I've learned a lot over the course of working on these 3 presentations. And I've picked up some skills that I'm anxious to use more. And oddly, they're film skills, you know. It's a little ironic because I'm usually the guy dismissing film a little bit and expressing my love of the theater. You know, like the idea that Coconuts and Animal Crackers are the Marx Brothers movies I'd most like to see. Not that they're the best movies they made, but that they're the best record of their stage act. You know, I love the theater, and there's plenty of movies I love too, but I've never loved film as a medium the way I love the theater. But now, in order to deal with the pandemic and how to do a Freedonia Marxonia streaming, I kind of, for the last few years, have sort of felt like a filmmaker with this stuff. And I like to try to set little challenges for myself and try to do something that I'm not quite sure how to do for that reason, to pick up skills and to keep things interesting. And all 3 Freedonia presentations have that. They also function that way. They're also kind of demo reels of things that I was trying to figure out. And sometimes in these presentations, I've nailed it, and sometimes I've missed the mark a little. But you know, Home Again had all this masking in it. There's a shot in Home Again where I'm sitting on the corner of Broadway and 39th Street, and I look across the street at the former location of the Casino Theater, and the casino sort of appears in its former location. It's pretty crudely done, but at the time, that was the first time I'd figured out how to do something like that. And then that, you know, continued through There's Nothing Like Liberty, and got to tonight's presentation where in the Show Me a Rose segment at the end, it was my first time trying to do a little chroma key work, you know, green screening myself as Groucho into all those locations. And also the rotoscoping to get that, to make Raquel Torres deliver that line to Zeppo instead of Groucho. You know, these things are fun to work on. The challenges are fun. It's agonizing fun, but it's so satisfying when something like that works out, you know. Now I'm rambling about visual effects. Bob wants to know if there won't be a 4th presentation, will there be a 5th? Oh, Bob, you're so silly. There will be more stuff for sure. There will definitely be more Marx Brothers stuff, and you know, and going forward, I may be working on video things a little more. I still love the theater the most, but I've really enjoyed this. Oh, that's nice. Seth forgives you, the note says, for telling a room full of Dick Cavitz and Adam Gopniks that he was going to learn to play the harp. Yeah, well, you saw that in the presentation. I needn't repeat the story, but yeah, if you ever have a friend who is in the process of learning a challenging musical instrument, which he or she may or may not play publicly some months down the line, you probably should wait for that friend to tell you that that is really happening before you announce to a crowded room that that's what he's doing. But you know, it's funny, I in the piece tonight about seeing Animal Crackers at good speed, you know, there's that line about the response to Les's solo in that show, that it's like the audience had been rewarded for their faith in the cast, with the feeling that we made Harpo play the harp by believing in him. And I like that line a lot. And when I wrote it, I was really just writing about that moment. But I realized, well, that also perfectly describes the dynamic with Seth and the harp and learning the harp. You know, not that I made him do it, but that I felt all I had to do was believe in him. And I did, and I do. Nick thinks Matthew and Bob should tour. Yeah, well, it's hard enough to get these guys in the same room. You know, Matthew on the other side of the Atlantic Auction, that would be a difficult tour to put together. But yeah, would anyone not be happy to hear more duets by Matthew Coniam and Bob Gasal? Yeah, boy, that was a treat. The first time that idea emerged, Bob says, I shan't work with him again. Well, that's bad news for everybody, isn't it? Tom Hamill asks, did Dick Cavett or Adam Gopnik see Seth perform at the Connolly? Yes, Adam Gopnik. Adam, who was wonderfully supportive of the Alsatias project, and he's really been wonderful to me. It probably would be an exaggeration to say that we're friends, but we're friendly and have spent some time together. And he was a guest on the Marx Brothers Council podcast for our Horse Feathers episode, which is wonderful. Adam Gopnik's been my favorite New Yorker writer forever. And yes, he came to see the show at the Connolly. He sat in on a rehearsal, which he wrote about in the article, and then he came back and saw the show during the run. Dick Cavett sadly did not get to see the show at the Connolly. We were in touch with him throughout the run, and there were numerous attempts to make it happen, but he was out of town for a significant part of that time, and he expressed his regret, and he too has really just been wonderful to me. You know, I've had the pleasure of spending a little bit of time with Cavett on 2 different evenings, and he too was really supportive about the project. He said some lovely things about my performance as Groucho, which he saw at the Lambs. We did some excerpts, but he unfortunately missed the show at the Connolly. Okay, there is a note. I suspect this is from Amanda. This is a note about Dick Cavett, who Amanda says is Amanda's boyfriend. Yes, my wife is in love with Dick Cavett, and that's something I have to live with, and it's something we all have to live with. Even Dick Cavett has to live with that. Actually, on a couple of occasions, the 2 occasions that we've spent a little bit of time with Cavett, I do think he liked you. I think he was into you. And who wouldn't be? Richard Abraham asks, as a council completist, the Sheen number was amazing. Yeah, you know, Bob and Matthew, you know, I wasn't sure how willing they would be to sing a song. I didn't know if either of them sang, but it seemed like maybe that was a big ask. But I asked, and they were completely on board. Then they really liked the idea. They really liked the lyric, and they recorded it independently, and putting it together was wonderful. I also have to say their dance moves, that was the big surprise for me. I was not aware those guys could move like that. Okay. Well, it seems like perhaps we are going to bring this thing in for a landing, if there are no more questions. So let me reiterate my thanks to everybody at the Freedonia Opera House and in every location where you've been following this live tonight, as well as everyone who watched the previous 2 years' presentations and has supported all of these Marxian projects over the years. I hope everyone has had a good time. I certainly have. And the most special of special thanks to Cindy Yoakum, and also Barbara Yoakum, Rick Davis, the 1891 Freedonia Opera House Performing Arts Center, SUNY Freedonia, the Daniel Reed Library, and everyone up there. I really can't thank you enough, and everyone who participated tonight by sending me a song to include in this. I know it was a leap of faith on your part too, and I really appreciate your being a part of this. You really made it, and I think, as I have often said in the theater, but it applies here too, the best thing about this show was its cast. Barb says we should go get dinner. I think that may be just what I do. But maybe, maybe sometime in the near future we should plan an in-person Marxian dinner of some kind. All right. Well, thank you so much, everyone. I will see you soon the next time we do something. In the meantime, please listen to the Marx Brothers Council podcast. Our most recent episode is our Animal Crackers deep dive. I think it's one of our best episodes. Heidi Gassel is our guest, and it was wonderful. And Animal Crackers is all of our favorite Marx Brothers movies, so we had a lot to say about it. And those will keep coming to you, so the podcast, long may it wave. Okay, well, this is a really good note to end on. Tom Hamill says, "You are the bonks!" All together now. Nat Bonks! Nat Bonks. All right, friends, I love you.